Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey Bob, I'm doing swell. How you doing?
Good, and welcome everybody to the Pop Culture SquadCast. We are live. It's been a minute. We were supposed to be live last week, but had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so we're back to you tonight with a great guest. How have you been?
I've been doing okay. I've been enjoying the weather, which is
Mhm.
really stupid because you get used to it and you think that's the way it should be.
Yeah,
So I'm trying hard not to get used to it. Otherwise, I'm doing good. It's been a fun few days.
good, good. So in the time that we've been apart, New York Comic Con happened, and I was
Yep,
there for all 4 days
yep.
of that madness. Um, there's a
And you
bunch of
didn't
stuff.
get COVID.
I didn't get COVID. I was nervous about getting COVID, but I didn't, especially when I got back and everybody else had gotten COVID. But no, I didn't. I tested.
That was the super spreader that I was afraid that Baltimore was going to be.
Yeah, and Baltimore really wasn't. I know
No,
that a couple of people did, but yeah, it was. I mean, people I had dinner sitting next to ended up getting COVID. Heidi um, tested positive, and I was out with her, and yeah, it was tons of people, and luckily nobody's been terribly sick from it. There've been some people who had a tougher case than others, but it's been something that people
well,
get through. But
last
it was
night.
crowded.
Oh yeah, well, it's always crowded. You get 7 people there, and it looks
No,
crowded,
I mean over the
but
past
but
three
it is
years,
crowded.
it has gotten successively more and more packed. Like Thursday wasn't, from what I understand, Thursday was not sold out, but you couldn't tell. It was a busy day.
That's why I
Um,
don't go to the show. I just can't move around. Old
uh,
crippled guy like me.
what I want to we got to touch on something because we haven't done it. We haven't touched on it live since this happened. But like the night before the show, there was a bit of a loss in the community, and so
Mm.
Keith Giffen passed away, and of course he did it in a way that only Keith Giffen can. By oops, we are missing stuff here. Sorry, that's not what we wanted. We wanted this. We wanted Keith to let us know that in his own way he wasn't going to be there.
That is probably the best address to one's own death that I've ever seen. I've My favorite, it was inadvertent. Keith knew he was dying, wrote that, and had his family post it after he died. And God bless him for that. That is wonderful.
Absolutely.
There was a comedian named Dick Shawn. He was in The Producers and in a lot of stuff in the 1960s, Mad World. Very funny guy, very good actor, very good performer. Did wonderful stand up. And he was delivering sort of college lectures, in the last few years of his career. And it was about the nature of comedy and what comedy is like and how you do comedy on stage and how you do timing, which is the toughest thing to talk about. And he said, for example, if I had a pregnant pause here, you would think there was something wrong. And he stood there at the podium and collapsed. And the audience first was a gape and agog. And then they began to laugh because what he just said. Holy shit, what's that?
I don't know. You're magical, Mike. You're magical.
Wow. Okay. All right, I'm going to start a religion around me. And then finally, after a while, the laugh kind of wore off because he was holding it way too long. Is he making a point? Is he not making a point? Turns out he wasn't. Turns out he dropped dead.
Wow. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean the Keith left a big hole. There are it was one of the most poignant things was I went to the Metropolis panel at New York Comic Con, and there were some interesting things there. Jason Aaron's going to be writing Superman. That's good. Um, we talked about there's some other things that came out of that that are gonna change or be important in the DC universe, whatever that means. But I think the most interesting and poignant
It
thing
means that
was
if you have a 20 minute time span, you get a lot of change. But on that 21st minute, they're going to start over.
yeah, that's interesting. But Joanne Starr was there, and she's currently writing Fire and Ice: Welcome to Smallville. And if you have you been reading that at all?
I haven't read that. There's
Okay.
just like 2 issues out, right?
Yeah, there's 2 issues out, or maybe the
Yeah.
third. It is a love letter to the JLI, to Mark and Keith's Justice League. It is Elron's in it, and it's just she nails it in terms of the comedy, and but updating it for a current generation who didn't read those books and probably wouldn't go back and read those books. But it is just perfect. The artist has Kevin's sensibilities too. It is just wonderful, and she kind of broke down a little bit, and it was just like how much that meant to her and how much bringing that energy to a new comic for today's readers was important, and it really it was very moving. And so I will miss him. I will miss the opportunity to talk to him again. um,
Well, I'll certainly, I do miss Keith, and I'll certainly continue missing him. And I hadn't seen him for a couple of years, partially because I don't do the New York shows. He hasn't been down to Baltimore lately.
I don't know that he's
So,
done the show since we saw him in when we did the Secaucus show.
yeah, yes. So that part is sad. That part is always sad. No matter who dies, it's like, oh, geez, I wish I spent more time with him. Unless it's like Stalin. But
Yes.
but Keith was always rare and unique and interesting, generally funny. The cigarette smoke was a little tough after a while, but otherwise, that was it. And there was a warmth and an honesty that came out of him. We had I had encountered a few times when we were talking about non-comics things. It was really interesting. And that's always fascinating. Talk to a guy you know in comics, who's you've only known from comics conventions or work together or what have you, to talk with them about stuff that's just not comics related at all. It also helps if it's not political at all, but you're talking to me, so screw that. Um, and Keith was always sincere, somewhat surprising. His points of view were unique and cut right to the bone. And I love talking with him.
I did too. I only had the opportunity a couple of times, and he was visually someone you might find to be unapproachable. He was
Yeah.
the curmudgeon's curmudgeon, and he enjoyed every bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, both times I talked to him, and they weren't interviews; they were just fan discussions. He was engaging, happy. The first time he had just had lunch with Colleen Doran, who is a huge, they're close friends, and he was just in a great mood, and just happy and yet biting and sarcastic. Second time I talked to him was that last time we saw him in Secaucus, and I've written a story. It's on Pop Culture Squad about my appreciation for the 5 years later Legion superheroes, and in that run that he shepherded, there is the first same-sex couple in DC Comics history, which is Lightning Lass and Trinity Violet. And I talked to him a little bit about it and how much I appreciated it, and I wanted to. I had hoped at some point to have a longer discussion with him about it. I didn't, but in the brief moment that we had, he was very proud of it, very proud of what they had accomplished with that story, and uh, a little bit stick it to the man, which is very Keith.
Yeah.
That that it wasn't it was under the radar, and they did what they wanted to do. And nobody told them no, and it's just a great testament to who he was.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really gonna miss him, but to tell you the truth, I'm gonna miss his work all the more.
Oh, sure.
His work was always interesting, even if you didn't like the subject matter. Let's say hypothetically you're not a Legion fan. That's easier today than it was then. But to not be a Legion fan, you'd still enjoy his stuff. You might not want to make a commitment to the characters or the concept, but his stuff was good. His stuff was always interesting, fascinating, worth reading. And for a writer artist in the comics field, I can think of no greater compliment I can offer a guy like Keith.
Sure. I want to turn back to a couple of other things that happened at New York Comic Con that were very interesting. It seemed to be the convention of announcements. There was the everybody was announcing something. Somebody had something. There was exclusives. There was this. There was that. I mean, just a couple of things. There was this Ghost Machine imprint, and I don't know. It's not a company. It's an imprint that is going to be published through Image. But a bunch of artists and writers and creators are going exclusive. They're finishing their commitments and they're starting a new endeavor called Ghost Machine. Jeff Johns being the primary luminary amongst them, but also Princess Manipul and a bunch of others, and we'll be talking about as they come out.
It's a good crew. I mean, some of the best that we've had going in the last decade or so, or in Jeff's case, or three. And the funny thing is, even though I'm a Justice Society fan, and I like his work on Justice Society, I've always been more interested in Jeff's work on his own, not company owned, and he's done not that much of it. No. And it's always been much more fascinating to me. Yeah, me too.
And we'll be getting stuff from them as Pop Culture Squad. I've already made some connections to the people running that. The other one that was big was Rick Remender and his Giant Generator is the imprint. They currently print with Image as well, but they're doing a lot of exclusives for artists who are going to be working with them, which I think is good. I mean, a lot of the artists are people that he's worked with before. I hope that there's enough work to keep everybody busy. And it comes the Jeff Jones, JG Jones has already, said some of the things that he's working on with them. So that was kind of good. Was the concept of exclusivity something, or was that around for creators when you were there?
When I was there in the 80s, yeah, sure. Not in the 70s that I recall. I can't think of a couple of people who had contracts. Mike Fleischer at DC, Vinnie Coletta, unfortunately, at DC.
Then he was not at DC, and then he went to Marvel. Or he just
invariably, once you're done with your contract at one company back in those days, you'd go over to the company other than the one you just labored for. You go to the other side of the street, so to speak. Sometimes it's just time for a change. Sometimes they wave more money underneath you, or more often than not, you're just tired of doing the same thing with the same people. Here's some different people. It's a tight-knit community. We don't know everybody, but we know each other pretty well. And maybe there's some cool opportunities. All the time, a creative person gets phone calls, emails, texts, ESP, saying, we're working on this project. It's perfect for you. What do you think? We'd like you on board. And then about 20 minutes later, there's another one. It's amazing. Well, no, of course not. If you're looking for work, you don't get shit.
Right.
But if you're not looking for work,
Right.
oh my God.
That's unfortunate because we want everybody to be working. The last announcement stuff I want to talk about. I went to the Mad Cave panel, Mad Cave Studio, and Mad Cave continues to impress me. Mike Martz is there now. They are producing solid stories. Things are coming out. I'm enjoying them. There were two very, very big announcement things that were on there, and and one of them like made me absolutely crazy, which is this. So we knew that they had the license for Gatchaman to make comics, and at the show they announced that Cullen Bunn and Chris Batista are going to be doing the main ongoing series. They've said that it's about 2 years worth of planning already in place of comics in place, and then there's going to be tie-ins and one-shots and stuff like that that are going to be written by Steve Orlando and Tommy Lee Edwards. They don't with as many different artists as they can, so everybody gets a chance to play with Gatchaman. So I am very excited about this.
That's cool. That's
and
cool.
I've already,
And it's a little surprising to me because that's not the type of thing they've been known for, but that's fine. That's great.
Well, the other thing is the other announcement that they had. So Chris and Steve and Tommy Lee were there on the panel, and they talked. And anybody who has any fandom for Gatchaman, G-Force, Battle of the Planets, whatever you want to call it, will be happy with what they heard at that show. These are people who respect the property, want to play in the property, and not, and think that there's a lot to explore there. And I think that's important. The other one that was there was Jeremy Adams was there, and he was announced as being the ongoing series writer on Flash Gordon.
Not to be confused with the newspaper strip that started Sunday.
I saw that as well.
Yeah,
yes.
I'll be writing about that on Pop Culture Squad this coming week.
I am looking forward to that. But
yeah,
Jeremy Adams had some good things to say about that. And before we get to our next topic, the one thing that was very interesting, one of the people in the crowd, not me, but somebody in the crowd said, well, now that you have Flash Gordon, are you going to be bringing along any of the Lee Falk characters and give Flash some friends?
Right.
And I'm going to get rid of them, take this out of the thing because Mike Martz's response was, so we'll leave it at that.
Well, I wish him luck. I am so happy that the people that I had to work with over at King Features, with the complete exception of Lee Falk, who is a wonderful human being, the other people, some of them are probably not living anymore, but I don't know which ones, so I have to be careful about what I say. But they're not people I would ever want to work with again. Now, that was decades ago, and I've known other people at King Features before and since, great people, but the folks who were, that Flash Gordon thing still sticks in my craw.
I understand. Listen, that Flash Gordon series was one of my favorite things of the time. When it was coming out, it was the book I wanted to read every month when it came out. So.
I'll tell you, and I respect that, and I thank you for that. I'm not as objective, having had to slog through that with Dan. Dan Jurgens, an amazing storyteller, writer, artist, and he believes in himself. And he was defending his own work. It was brilliant. His original approach to Flash Gordon, which King Features actually approved before he wrote it and drew it, and then had other people who weren't with the company at the time say, oh no, that sucks, you can't do that. That original approach was better, as one might expect it to be. So I'm annoyed about that. Still, thousands of years later.
Well, you should be. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a reason why you should.
Right? No.
What I want to change the topic a little bit, and you wrote about something in this week's Brainiac on banjo, and it was that in the most recent Superman, Superman 850 or whatever it is, uh, there is Perry White is
So,
running for mayor of New York or mayor of Metropolis. I'm sorry, mayor of Metropolis. And I just wanted to kind of talk about like there has been a history of comic book characters uh, vying for and or succeeding in accomplishing or acquiring real world political positions.
yes.
Currently, the mayor of New York in the Marvel universe is Luke Cage. Go figure.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's kind of interesting. I don't quite buy it. I don't think that is the Luke Cage that I'd been reading before, but it's
but
close.
prior to him being the mayor, it was Wilson Fisk,
Right.
which is more along the lines of President Luthor, right? Which we had that for a
It's
while.
it's a lot, both in terms of theme and in terms of visuals. It's a lot like that. The only difference in my book is that uh, Fisk was too well known as and too well connected as a horrible human being, whereas Luther
Sure.
could point to things that he had done that were good for humanity. Fisk could not do that.
So you don't buy it in the you can't suspend that reality. Like there's no way
Oh,
that the
of course I can. If I could accept the fact that there's a guy who's leaping through um, Manhattan on a thin string, and God knows what that string is attached to, all the while avoiding the other 312 Spider-Mans of both sexes who are doing the same thing in the same place, I can believe in almost anything in comics. And that's what
well,
comics are for. So I don't have a problem with that.
all right, and that's fine. But so what do you think about the concept of bringing the political so specifically into superhero comics? Like
Well,
there,
I think
like
it's a
I get it otherwise. And if you just want to say like, um, Ex Machina was very political,
Mhm, mhm.
but it was not supposed to interact with you know the Thing or Doctor Strange or anything like that. So it was outside of the realm of superheroes that we learned about, but it was very political. So, but like where you bring in into the DC proper or Marvel proper, and you bring in those type of political positions, what do you think of that?
Well, first of all, let us remember guys like Jack Kirby, and I will talk about Jack in the specific, had a lot of political nuances in their work, and sometimes they were quite upfront. You know that guy was supposed to be that guy. Sort of like you knew Mo Howard was playing Hitler, but a goofy Hitler, you know? So it's an old tradition, and we should talk about the real world in order to establish verisimilitude, which readers tend to like, something they can identify with. It was difficult to do until fairly recently, but we cut a month or two out of the time it takes to produce a comic book, so it could be a little bit more relevant.
Sure.
Except for the past 5 or 6 years when things change 7 times a day. And then at the end of the week, nothing has changed. So it's a little hard to plot in the real world, to plot politics in the real world. It's much easier to plot politics in the comics world.
Okay. So what do you think? Should Perry White be the mayor of New York,
Well,
Metropolis?
as I mentioned, yeah, as I mentioned in my column this week, um, I think that the citizens of Metropolis would probably have a good mayor, at least a moral mayor, by my definition of morality, for the city of Metropolis. an experienced guy who knows his way around. But the impact that the plot would have on other characters, on Superman,
Right.
on Lois Lane, on the Daily Planet, on everybody who works for the Daily Planet, on the Daily Planet's legacy and Perry White's legacy is amazing. There's a billion stories you can do out of that. So if they can and do, and they're good, God bless them. But that you can say that about any project. Just write your
Sure.
way out of it. It's great. But that's cool. I hope they do it. I think it would be kind of disappointing if they don't.
Because
Nobody was
they've not
surprised.
given us the opportunity to look at it, right?
Yeah, most people, I'm sure, thought that Batman and Catwoman were not going to get married, and B, Superman was not dead. There are certain givens. So I don't know about this, but I hope for the best.
Well, yeah. Well, Alfred's been dead for quite a while now.
Yeah.
So, we never know. Maybe it's time for Perry White to move on from Superman's immediate realm.
Maybe. I think that all of the
cultural
connections Superman has, which goes back way before you were born and even before I was born.
Yes.
It's such that there was. Yeah, well, we didn't have a lot of oxygen. We hadn't invented fire. But Perry White is a big deal in our culture, in our philosophies towards life. He was the major character in the TV series of the 50s, which has run ever since, and was mayor, actually, but although that was only by reference, not by story. And we all know who he is. We all care about who played him in the movies. It's like one of the big casting decisions. Yeah, who's going to play Perry White? Like, who's going to play Alfred? Same thing. So I think that Perry will always be wedded to this greater Superman mythos. But that's really for something for people 10 years, 20 years down the road. That's for that group of creators to go and say, okay, we have this planet where Perry White ran the Daily Planet for decades, did a phenomenal job, became mayor, did good, bad, or indifferent, and now what? Well, that's up to them, not us. They'll work it out if they're pretty damn good.
Well, that's fine. So, was there a bad portrayal of Perry White that you encountered? I mean, you've seen it all.
A bad? There were a few moments in scripts, in stories, Superman stories in the comics that just didn't ring true. But if you produce that volume of material, you're going to get a couple that just don't work. So nothing egregious comes to mind, and some were really spectacular. John Maxwell, was that his name? No, Hamilton. John Hamilton was who played Perry on the TV show, and was in every other movie ever made that didn't have a budget. He was great. When he died right before the last season, they didn't know it was going to be the last season, but right before the last season began production. So in the last season of The Adventures of Superman, every time you saw Perry White, you saw some footage that had been previously aired during the color period of Superman, because they couldn't use it for a season or two because that was in black and white.
Really?
So, and they didn't have colorizing then, but that's okay because they didn't have the budget for it anyway. He was enormously popular as Perry White, and if you look at the Superman comics that they published at the time, you'd see Perry was on more covers. He was playing a more prominent role. People responded very, very strongly to him. And I think that they would have in the movies had they decided to write a apart for Perry and put him on sort of an arc. They didn't do that. You can't do everything. A movie lasts 2 hours, or if you're Martin Scorsese, the rest of your life. And fine. This unexplored area, they can actually make a mayor without screwing up 14 different TV and movie projects. Maybe. But they will.
Okay.
Sorry for my cynicism. I know it surprises you.
Well, it's fine. I don't know. I've always enjoyed the casting, like as you mentioned, the casting of people like Perry White and Jimmy Olsen and
Yeah.
The ancillary Superman, people, and I just think that I don't think I've been disappointed by a casting.
I can't think of one.
I can't remember
that didn't work.
Superman Returns, but otherwise, I remember who it was then. But
wasn't that Superman Returns was Jackie Cooper? Wasn't that's the second one?
No. Jackie Cooper was in the first 3 or 4.
2.
The Brandon Routh one. I don't remember who's Perry White then. But then there's always Michael McKean, which was fantastic.
I thought Michael McKean was terrific, and I was pissed that they didn't run with him as a character. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't run with him as a character, quite frankly. But I thought he was perfect in the role. And the beautiful thing was he was supposed to be playing a young pre-editor Perry White.
Yes,
but he was just the same old gruffy bastard that he was in as an older man. And that is exactly the Perry White that I think of. Perry White was born that way. He was born a 52-year-old cigar-smoking guy with a vest.
Right. All right. We are going to shift gears because our
Can we do one quick thing before that?
In the green.
Yes. I mean, I'm feeling badly that we're keeping Becky waiting, and I don't want to do that. But do we have another SquadCast this week? You and I?
No, we don't. We don't have a live one, but on Thursday, on popculturesquad.com, there will be an article linking to a YouTube video that we actually did record an interview with Danny Fingeroth yesterday, and it was really fun. So please, absolutely, we'll remind you before we're done. But check it out on Thursday. It will go live on our YouTube channel. And if you are not already subscribed and liking this channel, please do it now. And you'll get notified of it. He has just completed and is about to publish a new novel or investigative novel history.
It's a biography.
It's a biography. Okay, that's fair.
It's real. I mean, it's not fiction. We think.
Sure. No. It's not fiction. Non-fiction biography. It's a really good book. It's Jack Ruby and the many faces of Oswald's assassin. It's a
damn good book.
Damn good book. Great interview that you're going to want to find out about that on Thursday on popculturesquad.com and on our YouTube channel that you're watching right now. But thank you for reminding me, and I'll remind everybody later. But we're about to bring in our special guest, and Becky Cloonan has been working in comics for over 20 years. Please don't get mad at me for saying that. She got her start in the indie comic scene and has published work with just about every major publisher since. She is a multiple Eisner Award winner who is well known for her writing as her beautifully haunting art. Her latest effort, Somna, is a joint project with Tula Lote, and the two have this new book coming out from the up-and-coming publisher, DSTLRY. And before I step on my tongue anymore, we are going to bring in Becky Cloonan.
Am I muted? Can you hear me? That was a great intro. I was not expecting that music and the slideshow. It was beautiful. Thank you.
It was barely touching things. It was a lot of fun to put that together.
It's great to have you here, Becky. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
All right, so I have a lot to talk about, a lot of questions, but I want to talk about Somna.
Yes.
You texted me earlier today, and you mentioned that you've never done a book like this.
Yeah.
I've read issue 1 today. I think my ears are not burning anymore, but
I know. I was like, how am I going to talk about this book without turning beet red?
it is intense. It is amazing. What did you mean by that? Like, how was working on this book different?
Oh my God.
Everything else you've done.
This has been a book. It's been like 10 years in the making or something silly like that. Because I had the kernel for the idea so long ago. Like, I'm trying to remember, because I remember telling people during like a trip to Brazil, which was probably in like 2009. So I had this idea like a wicked long time ago. And it just kind of sat there, like as most ideas do, when you just kind of like shelve it because you're just too busy to work on it. And it's like, I don't know if I'm ready for this book yet or whatever. And then years and years and years went by, and I would, every once in a while, like your brain would dip back to this idea that you had and like flesh it out a bit more and a bit more. And finally, Tula and I had been in a convention. We were at a convention together, and I think in Sweden, in Uppsala, and we were like, we were like walking on some like ancient burial mounds, as you do when you're in Sweden. And I was like, I've got this idea. And we were just talking about like books we wanted to do. And of course, it's always like, oh, we should do a book together one day. And I was like, I've got the book. Like, here's the kernel. Here's like the idea. And I started telling her this story, and she got super psyched about it. And, it was one of those things where we started just bouncing ideas back and forth. And I went home and immediately like wrote a script for it, basically, well, like a tight outline. And sent it back to her, and we went back and forth about it. And then just like time passed again, as it does, like years and years and years go by because she's so busy and like I'm pretty busy. So we just let it sit and let it sit.
Very busy.
And
you're very busy.
I'm very busy.
You've been so prolific over the past few years.
Oh my God, don't remind me.
I know. I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. But somehow this past year, the stars like aligned. Like, I feel like it might have been last December, like in January, where Chip Mosier called me up about DSTLRY, and he's like putting together this new thing, and I was like, oh, tell me more about this. And of course, he knew about this book that Lisa and I wanted to do, because I can't shut up about it. I'm like, I've got this book I want to do. And we had talked about doing it a few other places, but this just seemed like the perfect time. And like Lisa's schedule opened up and my schedule opened up, and like DSTLRY happened, and all the stars kind of just aligned all at once. And it was like, well, now is the time. Like, if we don't do it now, it's never going to get done. So that was crazy. And Lisa and I had never really worked together before in a project like this, because we both are drawing it and we're both writing it. And we're taking like different roles in the book. Yeah, like earlier this year, DSTLRY put out The Devil's Cut, which is like a short like compilation of a bunch of the different artists that they're working with, like all the founding creators. And Lisa and I did a story in that was very much like a test run for Somna. Yes, there we go. And yeah, it's called What Blighted Flame Burns in Me, which is like kind of a Keats quote.
No, it was
it was fun, and it was like a proof of concept, just to see like, oh, how do we work together? Like, it's the book, that story isn't quite as integrated as what we're doing now, but it really helps figure out like, well, how does she work and how do I work and like how are we going to put these things together? Yeah, because you can tell by the name Somna, it's basically it was like just a shortened version of somnambulist or like somnambulism. So it does have a lot to do with sleep and dreams, and it made a lot of sense for Lisa to handle most of that stuff because her work is so ethereal and so surreal and just dreamy. She like makes it all dreamy. And then I kind of handle like the cold, stark day, the light of day.
Well, I wouldn't.
You're stereotyped.
Yeah. I will say, it is captivating. Like I had to remember to breathe while I was reading it. It was.
Oh, thank you. That's good.
And I will say that the transitions between your art are, I couldn't imagine them being better.
Thank you.
A
lot of that is done like as we go, because when we're doing the whole thing, we have it all laid out. We've got like a full script and we do thumbnails so we kind of know what we're doing. But it definitely is like by the end of the book, when we put all the pages together, we're like, we could use another page here. We could use like some, just, it does need a little bit massaging at the end because it's such like a intuitive, like I've never really worked like this before, so it ends up being
like how does,
let me ask you a question here.
Yeah.
It taxes my mathematics ability, which is non-existent. But I've been following what you've been saying. You've been working on this for a long time. You've had the idea and you've been kind of living it, and part of your brain has been building condos next to it. And you've been developing it for all of this time. Of course you feel a little, oh my God, I hope people like it. You always feel that way, but if you have so much of yourself invested in the project, then you really feel that way.
Yeah.
And that seems to be how you're responding. This is a very important project to you.
Yeah. And it's different from anything I've done, totally. Well, it has like different notes. I think working on it with Tula, her and I are such good friends, and having someone like that, like at your side when you're working on it, makes it super exciting to just like, I always just want to work on this book. It's been a delight, even when it's difficult. It's been a lot of fun, and when the book comes out, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I don't know, like it's fun. If I was alone going into this book, I would be terrified, but knowing that she's at my side through this, it's like definitely kind of makes it a little more exciting than scary, although it is kind of scary still. There's like a stage, you get stage fright, kind of.
Oh, of course, and you should.
The book is happening.
That's a good feeling. You work with that.
Yeah.
You work with that. You string your own tight wires.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's really good. When does the book ship?
November 22nd.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so tomorrow is the first issue of Distillery besides the Devil's Cut comes out.
Yeah. It's gone by Jock.
Right. Jock's gone. We are very excited about Distillery. We had Will Dennis on earlier this year. So how did you get involved with Distillery, and what's been your experience there? Like, so you are one of the founding creators.
Yeah.
You said Chip reached out to you, and this is what you said, we want to do this.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, totally, I'll do it. Well, at first it's kind of like, let me check my schedule. Nothing's going on. Yeah, totally, I could do it. It's like, it's one of those things where, I don't know, there was no like downside to it. It's, of course it's new, and everything that's new has risks, but when you look at, like the fun you might have in the process, it's like, there's so many friends involved, and it does feel like, I don't think I've been this excited working on a comic in a long time, especially coming off of like so many licensed books, which are also fun to work on, but like in a different way. So this kind of feels like going back to something that's like, it's reinvigorated my excitement and my inspiration. I just feel so creatively nourished working on this book. It's very different from like the last couple of years. I think for everyone has been kind of a slog. Uh, it's been difficult. I was definitely in like a rut, especially with drawing because I hadn't drawn in so long.
Great.
So it feels
Can
like
you-
this year I've just hit the ground running and I'm just drawing so much and it feels really good. So
I want you to.
One of the important things to remember about this racket is that we're in show business,
it's a total racket.
and we have every right to feel the insecurities that we feel when we're doing something we've never done before or we haven't done lately or we don't think we can do. But that's where our best work comes from, those anxieties. And looking back on your career, Becky, you don't make a lot of safe choices.
No.
I mean,
Where's the fun in that?
you're well, that's why I like your work. But you're a little bit looking for like, oh, what can we do that hasn't been tramped into the ground? And you're doing that. That's great.
Well, thank you.
What is it? What is it like coming back? Actually, I had actually a question that kind of does answer this. You've done everything in comics. You've written for other artists. You've drawn for your other writers. You've written for yourself. You've written with a partner. You do just covers at times. How do you view yourself in this industry? And what is it that? And it's kind of two part. Like, how do you view yourself in the industry? And what is it coming back to drawing a lot more than you have in the past few years? What does that mean for you?
Well, the first part of the question, I don't know if I've ever really like sat down and thought about what my place in the industry is because it's just, I don't know if it really ever occurred to me. Like I've just been doing it and it's just kind of,
But you have.
yeah, I just do what I
But,
like to do. But I don't know.
We all know what happened to Wile E. Coyote when he looked down.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't think about it too hard. But there was a point a few years ago. Now, I say a few, I mean like several years ago by now. Because everything, I guess, is a few years ago in general. Then I got like super burnt out. Yeah, I just was like, I can't draw anymore. Like, I just so sick of drawing. And that's kind of when I transitioned to writing more.
Mhm.
Just to try and like do something different for a while. And I just didn't like, I still like to draw, but I was just not, I don't know, I just didn't, for years it's been like everything I draw, like I hate it. And it's like pulling teeth almost. So even like, sometimes something will come out that you enjoy or you're like, oh, I kind of had fun working on that. I haven't felt like that spark of like just like creative drive and inspiration to really feel like I want to draw, which stinks because that's been like since I can remember, really. Drawing is like the escape, it's like where you go when you're unhappy, like what you do when you're like excited or you want to like express an idea or a feeling. I can always just go and draw that out. But for a few years that was kind of gone, and it was like you don't realize how difficult, or I didn't realize how difficult it was when I stopped enjoying it, and some of that is like, oh, I've made my mode of escapism my means of making money. Which is like super, I don't know, that's something that I think everyone in a creative field has to deal with, where it's like, oh, I made my passion the means for which I get my rent and stuff like that. So you kind of have to change like gears when you're working. But it's, yeah, last year or early this year, late last year, just kind of all came back, and I'm like, I feel like I've been on fire this whole year. Like I feel like I'm just like manic, and it's kind of
Sure.
cool.
No, I mean, I kind of
unhinged.
wanted to talk about this. No, I actually
Unhinged is the first word I want to see in anybody's resume if they're doing something creative.
Yeah, I'm a bit unhinged. But it feels good, so I'm happy with it.
You said something that really struck a note for me. When I started out in radio, and this is long before anybody was born, I told my editor I was writing for a alt weekly newspaper, although they didn't have that phrase yet. And our circulation was 48,000, so it was hardly alt. But my editor, who was a brilliant man, still around, Abe Peck is his name, said to me, "You're going to love radio." He'd done a little bit of it. But don't forget, after the third day, it's like a job. The cool
Yeah.
part wears off, and it's something you have to do. Fighting deadlines, meeting deadlines is a job. And you have to steer your creativity right into that work. And
Yeah.
I respect anybody who can pull it off with skill and originality.
It's a whole strange thing, and I guess like everyone's different, so it's not like I can offer there's some like advice or some magic trick that you use 12 simple tricks to
No.
figuring this crap out.
I have Neil's 8 rules to writing, so they're all right there.
See that he did it. I'll just read those. I could probably use that actually.
I learned more about how to write comics hearing an office with Denny O'Neil for 3 years. Just listening to him just make little snappy statements to his talent on the telephone. Back in the days we had telephones. And he would say things like, "Look, it may be phony science, but it's our phony science." And when I thought about that, it didn't take long. I was thinking, that's right. That's absolutely right. And that tracks with like my improv training and all that other shit. You commit.
That's really important. That's important to remember when you're writing characters who are smarter than you.
Right.
Who's smarter than you?
Best advice I'd ever heard.
That's great. That's great.
You started doing this as a young woman, and it was. Did you view art as an escape?
Oh yeah, I still do, in a sense, especially when I'm working on like a book like this, where it's like it's like purely yours, So it does feel self-indulgent and like that just kind of grubby, like you get excited about it, you like want to talk about it. So that's pretty exciting. But yeah, it was always
Dean wants you to move back to Brooklyn. I don't know if you caught that.
I don't think she's moving back to
I didn't see that. I'm on my phone, so everything's super tiny.
Yeah,
Dean,
no.
I want to come back to Brooklyn one day. I actually looked at prices before I moved to Portland, and I'm yapping now because they were so ridiculous. One day when I make $1 million, I'll move back.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure comics is a great business to go into if you're looking for $1 million.
It's not.
No, it's not. We're insane.
Oh, I know. Oh God.
So I want to come back to Somna a little bit because I calm down for a second here. We have to go. We have to take it slowly because I read this issue and I kind of read it through and I was. It is fantastic. It is intense. It is terrifying. It is sexy. It is just a great story. I'm invested. I hated that it ended.
There's 2 more books, so.
Right. So there's 2 more books.
And then you're just going to have to get over it.
Yeah, and then it's done.
I still want to know who I have to pay to get a slice of life strip of Little Becky every week on some web platform.
More an extra day in the week. If you can manage that, then I'll
one more day. I'll try and figure that out. If I can figure an extra day in the week, I want that because nothing brings me more joy than Little Becky strips.
No, thank you.
Imagine if you could actually sell extra days of the week.
Yeah, I would.
Now you want to make $1 million? That's it.
So when people get this on the 22nd of November, and they have to experience what I did, there's going to be 2 more books in this story.
Yeah.
Do you have other things planned at DSTLRY?
Yeah, I have. So my second I've pitched my second book to them and they like it, so I guess I'll just do that then after this. So I have a couple more ideas, and they're all like very much like in the same I don't want to say universe because it's not a universe, but the same like I don't know the world, I guess.
Setting.
So it's like similar setting, the same vibe, you know.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I like that vibe.
Okay, so you're Gene was talking about how you left Brooklyn, hopefully not in a huff. Where are you now?
I'm in Portland.
You're in
Moved
Portland. Oh,
moved about a year ago to Portland, and a lot of it was we were in Austin, Texas before this for like 5 years, and it was a lot of fun. But our landlord sold the house that we were renting, and we basically had like a month to move.
I didn't realize
and
that.
and we was like, okay, where do we go? Because Texas is kind of ass. So we were just like, no offense to Texas, but I mean Austin's great, but we can't stay in this state anymore. Um, and we thought about moving back home like closer to our parents because they're not getting any younger. And it would just kind of nice to be closer. But then we were just kind of like, well, maybe Portland because we just know so many people out there. And since we were under the gun, we were just like, let's just like look online and just see if we can find a place super fast. And we went to like all these different cities, like on like Zillow and like different like apartment rental websites. I found a place in Portland, and I was like, oh, this place is like, you know, looks nice. There's like some grocery stores nearby. Like it's a good price. And I texted a friend, Tim Weish, who's over at Dark Horse, and I was like, Tim, you live in Portland. Like, what's this neighborhood like? And then like 4 minutes later, he sends me a picture of the house that we're looking at. He's like, yeah, it's like 4 blocks from our house. And so it's just kind of like, okay, let's just move
cool.
there because it's like,
Yeah.
and it turns out that like Eric Powell lives down the street. Like we like triangulated the neighborhood somehow, and it's a nice, just feels good to have friends close, and there's such a like great comic community here. So even if you're just out,
Right.
you can just like text someone and be like, hey, I'm having a drink tonight. Like, wanna, you know, let's go get dinner or something, or like it's just nice. Yeah. So it's been good.
Well,
Portland's been treating
the
us
nice
well.
thing about Portland is that they just like legalized mushrooms and then decided to
Well,
let airplane pilots eat them,
they
and that turned out to be a
decriminalized it.
mistake. Yeah, they just
So it's
excuse me
not
for
technically
criminalizing.
legal. You can grow
Right,
them, but it's
right,
just decriminalized. Yeah.
right. I
You can
understand.
grow them.
Everything's decriminalized here. It's wild.
I don't have a problem with that. I just wouldn't give it to an airline pilot.
Well,
Wouldn't
I
it
wouldn't.
depend on like the um the airline if they had like a drug policy?
It was, well, yeah, you'd
Well,
think. The story I'm referring to, let me do it in 5 seconds here. A couple days ago, an airline pilot for Alaska Airways jumped on an airplane, was in the cockpit, but he wasn't the pilot. He was just there for a free ride. And he had just taken some mushrooms as part of his psychotherapy. Doctor gave it to him. And after they took off, he decided to leap forward and turn off the engines. And I was thinking, well, you shouldn't be allowed to fly airplanes.
Well, you shouldn't be in the cockpit if you're not the pilot.
There's that too. Yeah. Whoa.
Okay.
Well, there's your
There I
cockpit.
go.
Your plane turned around.
It's precarious, my setup over here.
Yeah, I understand. You were born where?
I was born in Pisa.
Yeah, I
In
wanted to
Italy.
talk
Top
about
of the
that.
tower, right in the very tippy top.
So
How did that
left a community. You left a community that is really well known for being into graphic storytelling, into comics. How old were you?
I was only there for a couple of months. I had no choice in it.
Okay,
It
I
just
see.
happened. I just had
I
nothing to
see.
do with it. It wasn't.
How did you end up being born in Pisa like that? I noticed that when I was.
That's where my mom was when she gave birth to me.
Why was your
Yeah.
mom there?
Probably visiting my dad. Probably we're living. I think she was living there for a while. Like I don't really know.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Well,
it's just.
I found that connection really interesting. It's like, wait a moment. This talented person left an area that is the breeding place for great comics to come to
I've been
America.
back
But
since, but I don't have like a. I mean, if I could finagle like an Italian passport, that would be cool. You know,
Well, birthright
catch me
citizenship.
leaving Portland. I'll be living in the Tuscan Valley, living on like a winery or something, or vineyard.
But you grew up in America for the most part, and you've lived
Yeah.
in a bunch of different places around.
Yeah.
And how does that affect you as a writer in the way that you've experienced so many different areas of this country and different? You lived in the South, you lived in Red South, you lived in Northeast.
Yeah,
Do you think
Austin
that affects
hardly feels like Red South though. Like Austin feels
Well,
like a little pocket. Like I
right,
never
so
felt like I was like
you were in the eye of the
Austin
hurricane.
is not in Texas. Only the state capitol building in Austin is in Texas. The rest of the city is in America.
yeah,
But
it's
you get what I'm saying.
I did travel around a lot. I was living up in Montreal for about 3 years.
Oh,
And the thing about that was I could only stay for 6 months out of the year with like my visa. And I ended up like just traveling for 6 months. So I'd be like there for 6 months and with like a studio space and everything. And then I would like leave. We would do like 3 month, you know, 3 months here, 3 months there. Um, and I do think that like I get a little boost after if you go somewhere new, you see new things, you meet new people, like you come back home and it kind of all like simmers, together. And then you end up, just, I don't know, it's definitely like a source of inspiration. But sometimes you can't ever pinpoint, like, oh, yeah, this is like a direct link. It's just all kind of gets mixed up in there. And, if you see new art, if you watch new movies, just it's all going to get muddled and in the brain. So I think it was a fun time. And it does, sometimes I kind of miss it, like back then I was like, man, I just wish I had a home where I could like put on my books and see them on a shelf and be like, yeah, that's my books.
Yeah.
Or like, have your kitchen the way you want it to be, or like, have a place to like come back to. But now that I have a place, it's kind of like, man, I wish I was like free to travel and like go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and like just, so it's kind of, I guess it goes both ways. I do miss
Well,
it.
you have to make sure you have to get those invitations to the foreign and far away cons so that you have a reason. Um, so one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I kind of want to go back to this and the way that you and Lisa Tula are working on this book. You said she's right by your side, but you're half a world away.
Yeah, I meant like emotionally.
No, but I'm saying like how does the time difference work when you are working so tightly creatively with somebody?
Oh, so we basically just like email stuff to each other, like WhatsApp stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's like, when you're drawing a comic, it's so slow anyway. So it's just like,
Okay.
oh, I've got 5 pages done this week or something. So it's not like we're, have to be in constant contact. It's kind of like, oh, we'll do some pages and then kind of see how it looks. And, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And especially with like the next couple issues, because the first issue was basically like her art, my art, her art, my art. And then as the story progresses, things like overlap a little bit more. So in book 2, there's some pages when it's like she's, going to be penciling some stuff and I'll like ink over it, or I'll pencil some stuff and she'll do like her washes over it. So it's going to have a little bit more like integration with the art. But
Okay.
that's stuff because of computers. We can just scan stuff in and be like, oh yeah, now I can print out these blue lines, or she can glitter my stuff digitally. Like it's just, there's so many different ways to make this book happen. The only difficult thing is when we have to have like a phone call, because for me it's like 8 a.m. It's just like I'm here with my coffee and she's like over there with like, a mimosa or something, or margarita. She's just like, she can, it's like dinner time for her. So it's different
Right.
different for me.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to that. Like it is it's very interesting. Like what would you do do you like it? Is this something that you would want to do again? And not necessarily with Tula, but like the concept of how you
Oh,
are co-writing, co-drawing a book with someone.
it's super fun. And especially with Lisa, now that we've done this, it's like, oh, I totally work with her again in a heartbeat, you know. I think, oh no,
Whoa. God, we
again.
lose more people that way.
Oh yeah, where'd you go? I lost you. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Ah, okay.
Sorry, I've got everything on a thing and it's just a little precarious.
Okay.
Lisa, yeah, I think if I did something like this with another person, it would be a little bit different just because it's like the way our art works together. It's like you
Sure.
just have to find the right story to make it work. And I think to work with someone else like this, it, the story has to lend itself to being separated in a way that makes sense for the art to be split up.
Sure.
That's like either a story from like two different perspectives or like this like past and present. Like there's so many different ways to divide a story up, but the story would have to like lend itself to that kind of telling. So yeah, if something else, if another story happened like this, like my next distillery book, I had an idea. I was like, if I wanted to do this kind of thing again with another artist, I could hypothetically break it into like two different parts. But then I was kind of like, I kind of just want to do the next one on my own, just to do the book on my own. Just
I'm
be
not
alone
complaining.
for the whole year. But yeah, I would love to do another, and I've talked with other artists about this, like doing stuff. It's just more fun, It's nice when
Yeah,
you're like working with friends.
I like it. I
Well,
like when you're having fun.
Yeah.
It brings out some amazing stuff. I had a question.
there's a price to pay, and it's an emotional price for having the ability and the authority to do your own work your way.
Yeah.
You get good enough and popular enough and therefore marketable enough. That's great. You can now boldly go where you're not exactly sure you want to go before. And that's kind of cool. That's
Yeah, I've always liked working on my own. And the only ones I've really just done like a bunch of short stories on my own. So this is similar to that. Um, I think it does get like a little lonely when you're working on your own stuff, just yourself. Uh, but it's a lot of fun too because it's just like purely you. So there's that element of, you're the only person responsible for anything. So, if it messes up, it's all in your head. Just fun.
I wanted to I wanted to touch on when you were younger or not as experienced. Was there a collaborator that you learned something from that you didn't expect?
Oh yeah, I think like because in the beginning I mostly just drew and worked with writers.
Right.
And every writer I've worked with, I've learned so much from. My early work was with Brian Wood. I learned
Mhm.
so much about like how to structure a story, how to set up a script, like how to organize it, economy of words, and the great thing about his scripts were I could always see them when they were like written out. It would be like, oh yeah, I know exactly how to tell the story because I can see every shot. Not that it was over directed, but it was just done in such a simple way where it's like I could see the panels like as they were arranged. So as a writer, that's like an important thing to be able to communicate that to your artist. Um, I worked with Steve Siegel on American Virgin,
Mhm.
and his scripts were so funny. Like I wish there was like they would print a book of those scripts because I would like he would write so many jokes in there that were just for me. Like no one will see half the shit that was written in there. A delight to read and so smart. Like just incredible. Yeah, just the way that he wrote was so good. I don't know. I feel like every writer I've worked with, I've learned about writing from. And I hope that I've picked up stuff and like, like I hope
No,
I've been able to like
no
implement that
question.
stuff. Yeah, as a
Do you think
writer.
it worked the other way when you wrote for artists, like when you
Um,
wrote for Steve and
when I wrote for other people, at first I would like storyboard everything out or thumbnail it,
sure.
just because I was like, I don't know how to think visually, or how to think. I can think visually, I can't think in words, I guess. Um, and after like a couple issues of doing it that way, it became a lot easier to, now I don't have to do that anymore. I would never show the artist like my thumbnails because I just don't
You
think it's
didn't.
like, no, because
That's
it's
an
like,
interesting question because
there's
I've
no
heard.
point. I'm not drawing the book.
The trick to good comics writing is to be able to think visually, which
Yeah,
is why, first of all, why I brought people from the stage into writing comics, because they knew blocking. They knew where to put
yeah,
the performers. And I've had a lot of success with that. I really enjoyed that a lot. But you can teach visual storytelling only so much to a person who doesn't, I don't want to say doesn't draw, but doesn't think visually. Either you do or you don't. You can develop it only so much. So some of my favorite writers are also, or were, or will be, or are occasionally artists, and vice versa.
yeah.
It's an
It
integrated
definitely,
medium.
it definitely helped me figure out like how many beats I can put on a page, like where's, the action, like how much emotional beats can I put on a page. So thumbnailing helped me with that. Um, yeah, I don't necessarily try and stage direct too much when I'm writing because I feel like that's a lot of it's on the artist. Although if there are like certain shots where I feel like, oh, this person's really tall, so maybe like shoot them from a low angle so you get that intimidating look. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
stuff like that. But it's always like, but if you have a different idea, like run with that because I'm not here to like micromanage how someone tells a story. And often like, if especially with like Marvel and DC, you don't often know who's going to be drawing before you're
Sure.
writing it because you're writing so far in advance that it's like, hopefully you're writing far in advance that you might have like, you're lucky if you know who's going to be drawing these issues. And so then you can kind of write to their strengths. Um, and if you're like, well, this person does great action, but maybe they're like emotional acting isn't quite that like nuanced or subtle. So you can kind of put the big stuff in there, like the big, you know, tons of fight scenes and a lot of bombastic stuff and like a lot of fun, and then save like the subtlety for someone down the road who's gonna, kind of handles that a little bit better. So I do think being aware of your artist is like letting them do a lot of that, acting and that kind of stuff. Like that's not for me to do as a writer necessarily.
So do you when you get writing assignments where you're not, where I'm sorry, when you get art assignments where you're, or when you did get art assignments where you weren't the writer, did you balk at art direction? Is that something that?
It can be difficult, and I think most writers that I've worked with, if I have trouble with something and like put it from a different angle, if they like they're like this happens from this angle, or like, and I'm like I just can't figure out how to work that. I'll change it, or like add panels or mush stuff together. And I think that's always it's no one's ever had a problem with that before. And
Okay.
if they have, they just haven't told me to my face.
Well, I
um,
mean, sometimes people have had issues where um, they run into a block where the writer will say one thing they want it a certain way and the artist doesn't want it that way. I overheard a conversation recently where um, you know the artist was basically coming back to the writer and saying, listen, you're doing it wrong, this is how you have to do it, this is why I'm not going to do it. And they were trying to uh, educate. They felt they needed to educate the writer. The artist did. I heard it from the writer's perspective, and the writer wasn't too happy about it. But again, you can see both sides, and it's good that you haven't had that type of conflict.
yeah, I think sometimes it's like I've worked with, I got a script once and it described someone like walking away from a scene, but then it described like it was like one of those things where they over too many descriptors in the panel. And it was like stuff was in there that I was like, I can't physically draw these two things at the same time because they're not facing the right direction, or they're like stuff's going on. I'm like, none of this it's not possible. So I was able to like kind of sneak in an extra panel where you could show someone's expression that like wouldn't be wouldn't be shown. So that kind of stuff, I think, as an artist, can be frustrating because you're like, why can't they just take out the stuff that isn't important? But I think maybe to a writer, sometimes it is like, even if you don't see that person's expression, maybe it's good to know what they're thinking, the character's thinking, so you can draw like their body language, their shoulders are, drooped if they're sad or something. But
There's a
sometimes it
phrase
can
for
be
that.
like, yes, well, sometimes it can be overwhelming. I think, as an artist, you can get stuck in the weeds on some of this stuff if you don't like too much description. And then you just get overwhelmed. You're like, oh, I've got to draw everything because it's in the script. And then it's like, well, actually, you don't have to draw everything. and I'm, as a writer, I'm definitely that kind of person that's like, whatever the artist wants to do, I'm not here to dictate how they want to tell
Right.
the story visually. So, I'm always on the side of like, if the artist thinks it's not right because for them, they're not going to be able to draw it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I'll always take the artist's side in discussions like that.
The problem doesn't happen. This problem doesn't happen very often, but occasionally a writer will write something and the artist will say, I can't draw that because it's visually wrong. And they'll explain
Yeah.
why it's visually wrong. These people have crossed over. They're now one person's on one side and the other person's on the other side, whatever. And then that person will whip out a Jack Kirby comic and say, no, he didn't. See? As well, yeah, but
Different artists,
you didn't. You didn't. Writers, all writers, no matter what you're writing, have to remember what Agatha Christie said. You gotta be able to kill your children. You may love that line, and this happens to me every week at Pop Culture Squad. It's happened to me every week for 60 years now. You take out stuff that you love because it gets in the way. Comics is a visual storytelling medium. It's
Oh yeah,
a
so much ends up
visual
on the
medium.
floor, but nothing's ever wasted because you can always take that and use it somewhere else, or
That's
it'll
right.
bubble up in a place where you're not expecting. Like, I never feel like something's wasted if I can't use it. Even
Absolutely
drawing
right.
something, it's like sometimes you'll draw something, you got to throw out the whole page, but it's like, oh, I can use that later, or that sketch is like, I can come back to it.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. Great ideas are in the minds of the creator, not the beholder. It's the creator's job to put those great ideas in a way that the beholder can behold them. You got to get it across the plate.
So,
and now we'll have a pregnant pause while Bob figures out, Jesus, we're
no, I know
too
what
far
I'm
away
saying.
from my notes.
I know what I want to say, but I want to hear what you have to say. I have a question. You wanted to add something. All right, fine. So Shelley Bond has told me that she has found the next Becky Cloonan. I don't know if that's the case. I know who it is, but the fact is that you made a mark in the industry, and that is a huge compliment if someone just say that they were the next Becky Cloonan.
That's crazy. It's crazy to think I've been doing comics that long.
Well,
it's when they start gaining on you.
Do you find yourself in situations where up and coming artists seek out advice from you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've done like a ton of like people want me to look at their portfolios and like just I get I'm really bad at email, so I don't always answer them, but I do get some email questionnaires from kids who get their college professor wants them to write to somebody, and you get a list of 20 questions in the mail being like, how did you start? Like,
that doesn't work for anybody. Nobody can ask that question and expect it to be repeated.
It's pretty it's very cool actually, and I get inspired too by the things that people are doing. I'm going to Thought Bubble next month in the UK, and there's like I'll always find something there that's like excites me, like just zines and like self-published stuff. Like it's just nice to just so many incredible artists out there who are like just starting, but it's like you can see the passion in it, and it makes me want to draw more. So that kind of stuff like fuels the fire, so to speak.
About 15, 20 years ago, they started having these little, small press conventions. And the one in New York was MoCA, MOCCA. And it's a wonderful show. And they're, not just little kids, it's independents and people who are making things other than comics, but it's still visual storytelling. And the first time I went, Martha Thomas told me to go. She was doing the promotion for it. And she says, "You'll enjoy this." Okay. I went and I saw, holy crap, we have a future. Look at all of these, kids, and not all of them want to be the next Spider-Man artist or whatever. They want to do their own thing, as kids always do. And it's very, very inspirational.
Yeah,
I
Mocha was
love it.
such a good show.
I
SPX and Ape.
I love the energy in those rooms. I just love it.
So you're working on this book.
Yeah.
Does Distillery, are you exclusive to Distillery? Is that how this works?
No.
You can't, because Scott's doing everything everywhere. But
yeah, I can do other stuff. I've signed on for 3 books with them.
Right.
So, and I mean, I'll probably just keep working with them because it's been like, so far, this is like a dream.
Sure.
So, as long as they'll have me doing stuff for them, I'll just keep working for them. Yeah.
Do you have any other projects that you're working on outside of that?
Yes, I do. So Michael Conrad and I had a short story in the Viz anthology Betwixt, which is like 6 short stories. It just came out like 2 weeks ago, I think. Junji Ito did the cover, and I actually have a copy here. Hold on. Yeah, it's nice and chunky. It's
okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it reads forward and backward because there's 3 American artists in the front and then 3 Japanese artists in the back. So when you get to the middle,
cool.
You switch it around, it reads right to left. Yeah, so we have a really cute story about ice fishing in here where it's just 2 friends having a good time and like nothing really bad happens at all. But I drew this back in January and it was the first thing I'd drawn in such a long time, and it's 30 pages long, little short black and white horror story. So it feels like mailed mini comics and stuff because it's just like that same format. It's having that Junji Ito cover is wild. Yeah, so good. He's one of my favorite cartoonists doing stuff right now.
So let us pose a world where all of a sudden, tomorrow morning, there are no more comics.
Right.
It just disappears.
So have we had comics this whole time and then they disappear?
Yes. It just disappears tomorrow morning.
Right.
And that leaves a lot of people unemployed. Some of them have a lot of talent. What would you do?
I'd probably just transition to like illustration or something, or maybe I'd write like a novel. I don't know, just do something else.
The funny thing is,
keep myself busy.
The great thing is you didn't go, "Oh, holy crap, I don't know what I'd do. I'd blow my brains out. I'd blow your brains out. Whatever." That's good.
Because I've done like a bunch of illustration, like my whole life, I guess. I've done illustration work, so it's like an easy thing to think like, oh yeah, I can imagine myself doing that full time. And after writing a bunch of scripts, it's only like, maybe I could write a novel one day because I like to read them, like maybe one day I'll write one, who knows? Yeah, it would stink because I'd miss doing comics. I'd probably still draw them in secret. Like, have they disappeared completely? Are they just like, or is it like illegal? Because that would be kind of fun to do, like illegal.
Actually, there's a hell of a story there. If comics were to be made illegal, what do the cartoonists do? There's a good story there. We all become Sergio Aragones. That's what happens.
Oh, that'd be great.
What are you drawing?
Another Somna page. I'm trying to get this whole thing done before Thought Bubble, so I'm just
okay.
I can't show you because it's
no, that's fine.
Messy,
I love when we do this and people are working. I think that's
I gotta get these pages done. Trying not to stress out too hard about it, but I'm
I want to ask you another question. It's kind of it's related to the story you just told about the book you did with Michael. What is that like in your life at this point in your life, where you're the person who's in your life is a creative person and you collaborate together? How's that rewarding for you?
So we usually write together, and we have a different creative partnership than like, what I had with Brendan and Carl on Gotham Academy, who like the way Michael works is different. So we tend to like I like to bat stories around a lot, and I like to talk about them until they're like talked to death, and then you get going on writing because you kind of figure everything out. Michael will just like get in there and just start writing. He's very much like a writer's writer,
Mhm.
sequester himself in a room and like not come out until the thing is done.
Right. Sure.
So that, and then we kind of bat the thing around afterwards. So it'll be like, oh, we'll go forward and have like, we'll do beats for it, come up with an outline for the whole story and then break it down into like smaller beats and then get that approved and then be like, okay, now we can break it down page by page. So when the scripting comes, it's really just a back and forth thing. Or if it's like I'm having trouble with a scene, I can pass it to him and like vice versa. So it's kind of nice. But it is very much like we each kind of have our own role in it. And it's just kind of
Is it
less.
natural or is it something you fight against?
I don't really fight. I'm pretty adaptable, I'm
Does he fight
all these
against it?
speakers.
Awesome.
We have gotten in big arguments over stuff.
Good.
But I think that's just like natural when you're working with someone.
Sure.
You want to like be like, oh, here's my idea, and like, if someone else doesn't like it, there's that natural like, why don't you like my idea? But in the end, it is all for like what makes the book better. So, in everything, in every creative partnership I've had, except with Lisa. Lisa and I are like, it's been the easiest book in the world. But there's always, I think you're always going to come to that point when it's like, someone's got an idea and the other person doesn't like, especially working on like DC stuff because there's so many moving pieces to like a superhero book, whether
Sure.
it's like, oh, we're getting a different artist for the next arc or the next issue or something, or like, oh, marketing wants you to put Batman in this issue. Like, can you move things around? So it's like, or, oh, we need to do like they're doing a crossover thing over here. So the next 2 issues are going to be like about that. And we need to like kind of so with a superhero book, you're constantly like managing this puzzle. It's like you're working on a puzzle that's being made as you're completing it. And so you're constantly trying to like problem solve, like on the fly, which can be a little stressful, but it's kind of fun when it just has its own challenges. So I think
There were
when you're
times
working
when
with,
I was at DC where I thought the management structure of the company was much akin to playing pinball.
oh
You
yeah,
know, you launch that ball, and you have certain control over them flippers, but it's going to bounce off a lot of stuff, and you're not going to tell where it's going.
yeah,
And
that's definitely a
that
great
could be
analogy.
rough, and it also could be a great challenge. It depends on your attitude and whether they've screwed you over lately or not.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's not worth getting too upset about because it's like it's only comics, at the end of the day. It's like and there's only so much you can do. So when you don't have control over a thing
That's right.
100%, it's like you do what you can to make it as good as you can. And then you just have to like let it go and be like, and now it's out of my hands. And now it's, you're just another pebble into the ocean, little drip.
I learned very early on when I was in the earliest days of First Comics. There's a real difference between working on a company-owned property and a creator-owned property. And when you're working on the former, it's part of the editor's job to sort of protect the company, protect the property, while at the same time you're protecting the talent to that company. Whereas if it's creator owned, it's like, you really want to do that? Okay, here's what I'm afraid of, but if you really want to do that, that's great. Or, wow, that's a terrific idea. We could never do that with Superman.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, I mean, Mike, that's an interesting point that I find, and I find in talking to people who are working for the big two licensed comic book companies that the editors have that goalie mentality today. That they are their role is protecting the character or the legacy or whatever of that. Do you, Becky? Did you, as a writer writing licensed characters, ever feel protective of the characters you were writing?
Um, a little bit. It's hard because when you're writing a character, you're aware of the other books that came before,
Hmm.
and so you're trying not to like tread old ground,
Hmm.
retread it. So in one respect, it's like you're not necessarily like protective of them because you know that the character's been through a lot before you got there, and just as long as you keep it like kind of in what the character would do, how would they act. I think that's good. Wonder Woman was tricky. We were on that for like 3 years, uh, and that was hard because I think they had, they were it was skewing like a little more YA.
Hmm.
So some of the stuff we wanted, not a lot of the stuff, some of the stuff we wanted to do was more difficult. Like we wanted to have her like decapitate the head of like a monster god. It wasn't even Wonder Woman. It was like Wonder Woman's evil clone or something, or evil twin. And we wanted to be like holding this head of a decapitated god, and it was like, nope, we can't have Wonder Woman doing that. And it's like, well, it's not Wonder Woman; it's her like evil Wonder Woman.
Right.
But that was still kind of like a little too close, and it was,
Really?
yeah. And I don't even know if it was editorial. It might have been like sales or marketing or something, where it was like they don't want you to do this.
Okay,
Um,
the sales and marketing people should
That makes
not be
sense.
allowed to read comics.
Yeah, so
But,
it can be a little difficult where it's like what I think the editor definitely has an idea for like what you want to do. Like when we came on Batgirls, it was definitely like at the beginning, let's make it like feel a little fresher, feel a little younger, without, but then that kind of, that changed as we started like pitching the book and as we got going, it was like, okay, like what do we really want to do with these characters and um like how do we stay true to what they want us to do, but also like do something that we want to do, so that can be
That's
kind of a tightrope to walk.
that's
Um,
the trick.
yeah, and at the end of the day, it's like you're doing a job that, so, you're being hired to do this thing, and there are like marching orders that you're given with like regards to, what kind of story you're telling. Especially when you're working in like with Batgirls, like with Gotham, like you have to deal with all the other stuff that's going on. Because when we got into that, there was like this whole storyline that was going on with like this magistrate and like all this other stuff. It was like James Tinian's run, so it was like all these characters, and we're kind of coming in like at the very end of that. So it was like, oh, we've got to include this stuff here and like a villain that he created, and then we've got to like tell our own story with all that stuff, and it
sure.
becomes
But you,
like,
you handled it very well. I mean, yeah,
thank
I can
you.
see I can
Yeah, it
see
was
how
super
all of
fun.
that was complicated in the start of your run, especially.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to be like, this stuff is like weighing the story down because it's like you're starting off and already there's all these things that you have to include. But that's kind of the fun of it is like, figuring out how to make it all work. Uh, and so I think, when you're working on licensed stuff, you always have to keep like a good attitude about it, or else you'll just drive yourself absolutely mental.
Licensed comics
So keep
can
writing them.
be horrible or can be wonderful. It's the luck of the draw.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've definitely had both experiences, and it's kind of nice now to not really be doing too much licensed stuff. But at the same time, it's like I do like it. It's kind of like it's like a nice way to be like, oh, it's a day job. It's like I don't have to be like as emotionally invested in these characters. It's just like,
Good characters are good characters, no matter who owns them. Good concepts, they're the same way. The trick is whether you have anything to add to that in any meaningful way, and
yeah,
then if you're allowed to, if
yeah,
they'll allow you to add something to the story. And if you don't, it's just going to be the same old thing after a while. It's
yeah. It
going to
can be
be boring
hard.
to reader and the talents.
Yeah, and that's why when Wonder Woman hit issue 800, you know, we were kind of like leading up to it. It's like I think this is where we hop off.
Yeah.
Was that
Because it's
was
like,
that
you know,
something?
we
How did that transition work? I mean, we've now had the current writer of Wonder Woman on earlier, like a month ago. But
yeah.
how did that transition work for you? Were
Oh,
you
that was
guys
it
you
was
guys were
super
ready?
easy. Yeah. We had like planned everything out, and the difficult thing was right before, so we had, you know, our storyline worked out, and then issue 800 was like our hopping off point. And I think leading up to it in like the 790s, uh, there was like the last two issues of that were like, or no, the last two issues were like its own little short story. But then the two issues before that tied into this like Lazarus Planet crossover.
Oh yeah.
So that was difficult because it's like, okay, well, we didn't, you know, get to tell everything that we wanted to do because now we have like two issues that we've got to like tie into this big thing. But for the most part, it was like, and then we have like two issues at the end where we can, it's like, oh, it's like a bottle episode kind of thing, like two short, or one 2 issue story. So it kind of got a little like fragmented at the end, but that's just the nature of like working with DC, you know. But yeah, that was a crazy run. Like we did so much wild stuff with that, and it's crazy to work on a character like Wonder Woman. You know, just the legacy that character has.
Yeah.
It's interesting. After I had you were on the show that we did during Women's History Month. We reunited the Shade the Changing Girl um, cast, and the week after that, um, I had on Trina Robbins and Mindy Newell, the first women to write and to draw Wonder Woman. So that was it was amazing to me. But you have a very interesting credit in your resume
That's a
in that you were
Batman
the
one.
first. Yeah. And you know, how do you feel? I want to know how you feel about it, because to me,
Oh,
I think it's terrible that happened. Number one, that that it was up until
terrible.
you to do that. I mean, you
I know it was
you
like 78 years or something like that that it took.
it
But
was it
here's
was
like,
it was.
so
Let
the
me
crazy thing
for,
about
for
that.
the watchers. Let me just. Becky Cloonan is the first woman to draw Batman, the book Batman,
Yeah,
and it was in
no
2012.
woman had ever drawn Batman before.
Well, I mean, in
No,
Batman,
I know.
in Batman.
It's such a
You
silly
know,
way for
there are
me to say
plenty
this.
of assistants who might disagree with you
That's
about that. There are a lot of invisible women out there.
well, that's what I was. This is my point about the whole thing, and that's the joke of it. Is like, oh yeah, no woman has ever drawn Batman before. Of course, it's like it's
No,
such a
no.
silly credit to have. Um, so I didn't find out about that until after I drew the issue. Kind of thank goodness, because I don't know if I want to be the person to draw that issue. Otherwise, it's just such a.
Right.
It's like gonna go on my grave. So like no matter what else I do, that's gonna be the thing that like gets carved on the gravestone. You know. And there's definitely been women who have like penciled it or inked it or something before and just not been credited, for sure.
Sure. Oh, sure.
That's
So
right.
that's kind of annoying that it's like,
It's
oh
the
yeah,
same thing with.
technically. So
It's the
it
same thing
becomes
with.
like yeah, it becomes an annoying thing where it's like, um, it's hard to enjoy the credit of something like that, or not even the credit, you know, having that like on my Wikipedia or whatever.
It is.
When it's like just it took so long for that to happen, and then it's also like I know that there's women out there who didn't get credit for it, um, who have worked on Batman before, for sure. Like there must have been. So it's hard to be like, oh yeah, what a great thing. Like it's a weird thing for the most part.
I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
mean,
Sorry for
it
bringing it
shouldn't
up.
have been that. It shouldn't have been that way from day one. But you know, those were other times, and they
Yeah.
weren't our times. Now we do everything that we can do because we think we might be able to do. You
Well,
know, not for any tokenistic reason. I can do that.
um, I mean, um, it's a weird thing, and I the only reason I brought it up is because it's weird. I don't want to, bring it up that way. I just think that it was too long in coming. Not that you didn't deserve I don't know, like the word honor is like kind of like stumbling out of my mouth here. Like
It was
I understand how you feel about it.
Yeah, and the thing, that issue too, it was like in the issue 12 of Scott Snyder's and Greg Capullo's Court of Owls. So it was like right at the beginning of that thing. I think my headphones are gonna die, so I'm gonna take them out really fast and then see if this. Are you there?
We can hear you.
I'm here. Yep, I can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Try that again.
We can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you. Great. So yeah, that was like in the middle of the Court of Owls, and Scott asked me, and I was like traveling during that time. And when I came back, I was like, I've got 3 weeks, and then I had to go to Heroes Con, and then I had to move. So it was like I really didn't have like the headspace to work on it, and I declined at first. I was like, I can't do this. And then I was talking to a friend, and I was like, I just turned down Batman, and he was like, what? You can't turn down Batman. Write Scott an email right now and say that you can do it. And so I was like, okay, I can do it. Like, you're right, I gotta draw this thing, because it's like, what if I never get another chance to draw Batman? And so I said yes, and I drew it super fast, and it was like an issue in 3 weeks, and Batman's only in it for like 3 panels. He's like not even in the book. So it seems like such a silly thing to be like, oh, you drew Batman for the first time ever. Like, no.
Listen, I have a statue over there.
Like, he was only in it for like 3 panels. It's not even like a Batman story. So that it's like, it's so the whole thing is really funny to me.
I think it's funny too. So
yeah.
I mean, believe me, I'm not. I think. Well, the fact that it wasn't until Mindy Newell wrote Wonder Woman during George Perez's, or at the end of George Perez's run, the first woman to write Wonder Woman on Wonder Woman. Like, that's the deal.
To be credited for
to be
writing.
credited, exactly.
Yes.
To be credited for writing Wonder Woman in a Wonder Woman comic, right? And
yeah.
and so and Trina wasn't even in a Wonder Woman comic. She was the first woman to be credited with drawing Wonder Woman in a Wonder Woman led comic.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so strange. And it's almost like it's kind of diminishing too when you're like, oh yeah, like you're the first woman to be credited doing this thing. It's like just not even mention it, because any way that you say it just sounds bad.
Exactly. I'm sorry
that's
about
right.
that.
Say these things
I'm sorry about
it. Like, no, it's not you. Just like in general, it's like this. Even like, if you're like, oh, you're the first woman to do this, it's like, but other women have done it before. So then it's like, oh yeah, but you're the first credited woman. It's like, well, that's even like, that's not good either. Like nothing about this is like, it's a Wikipedia fact basically, but it's definitely.
Let's talk about this. Look at this.
Okay.
This is amazing. This is amazing. I cannot wait. I want to bring it back to this because you've seen the completed book, right? You've seen all the pages put together, right? At this point, because I have. I mean, yes.
Oh yeah, we put it together.
And so, when you got to that point where this story that's been banging around in your head for nigh on a decade or so,
yeah.
And you this is going to be in people's hands in less than a month. What did you feel about it when it was done?
I'm pretty excited. I think I got a lot of my nerves out when we sent out the PDF to a bunch of people recently, and like, as you know, because you have one. So I think that kind of broke the ice a little bit on like, oh yeah, like so many people I know have seen it, and people generally, I don't know, no one's come back and been like, I mean, this was horrible. What have you done to me?
Well, I can say what you've done to me. It wasn't horrible.
People take you aside and say, were you drinking or what? You didn't get that.
No one's gotten upset with me yet. So, and no one's, thrown anything at me yet. So that's good. Yeah.
Maybe. When people
I mean,
throw shit at me, I take it as a compliment. It's like,
oh,
I offended you. Great. I broke through.
Yeah, you were saying something.
Yeah, so that kind of it was like ripping the Band-Aid off a little bit, where it's like almost having like a pre-release, like a secret release.
But you were afraid, you were nervous before that.
Oh yeah, and I'm still a little nervous, and I think when the book comes out, I'm gonna be on an airplane the whole day, so so I won't even be around to like celebrate it online. I won't even look. I'll be in an airplane, so that's kind of nice. I'll be in a metal tube, and then I don't have to worry about it.
Your airplane isn't going to be landing in Texas on the 80th anniversary of the assassination of the president.
No Texas layover.
Our 70th anniversary. I'm sorry, 60th. I can't count it anymore. Sorry, whatever it is, 63
sometime back in the 1900s.
Yeah, I know.
It
was Garfield. I'll shut up now.
Go ahead. You were saying.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I had to say.
I want to thank you for doing this and indulging our stupid questions.
Oh yeah, no,
you're
good.
I'm very excited for this. I'm very excited for the work that DSTLRY is doing. We're big fans of the storytelling. Like that's the one thing about this, and I had this conversation with Will Dennis, and I don't know if I've told you this, Mike, as well, but like one of the things that New York Comic Con was filled with all these announcements about this person's exclusive to that person, and this person's only going to do stuff there, and this and all this stuff, which is all great and fine, but like those conversations are not for your consumers. The people who are going to read the book don't care if this person is exclusive to this publisher or not. They just want to buy good comic book stories. They want good stories.
That's true.
Yeah,
but
it's hard to get like if you're a publisher and if you're a new publisher, especially like DSTLRY, I guess you're looking for like an immediate like publisher loyalty, which I think you can only do through making the book. So even if you say like a person's exclusive, hoping that people will be like shift their attention to this publisher. I think it's just in the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
It was different when there were only two publishers.
Yeah.
Then people would say, "Oh, does that mean that John Byrne isn't going to do Fantastic Four anymore ever again?" I like that. Okay, I get that. But now there's a million publishers, and
there's new publishers.
Brand loyalty has to be earned by a large group of people, not by A or B, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of new publishers popping up now, which is super exciting, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I really do like, and I think the industry is big enough to sustain it all. I think that comics, have that potential to support it all. I think it's easy to be like, oh, like sales are down, blah blah blah. But when you look at graphic novels and like things across the board, I think there's good reason to still be excited and think about the future of the industry. And you only have to go to a small press convention, like we were saying, to see so many young people, like just diverse voices, such incredible storytelling, and everyone's invigorated to make comics and to read comics, and like that's what perpetuates this industry. Like and not even this industry, but this art form. That's what's kept it going so long, and it's changed so much. I think about what it was like when I started, and what it's like now. It's like night and day.
Apples and oranges.
It's it's totally different, and it's like I can't help but think about good things when I think about this. And with DSTLRY in particular, it's exciting to work with them because they just, right now it's like Jock's book is coming out this month, our book is coming out next month, and it seems like a slow, like they're not pushing us to be like, draw this book faster. We're like, we want to release it in a timely manner, but also like, our next book is going to be, I think, in January. It's like they're giving us the space to like do the book as it needs to be done.
It's fine. And
Yeah,
like I said,
you're building up your, retailer loyalty and trust, and your, the readers trust, and not trying to, it's like they're giving each book the space that it needs to, like, land, and people need to read it, and we're not trying to do too much right away. It's like you're building a strong foundation, and I just really
This
appreciate
seems
it.
to me to be a very, very well thought out operation. Now I know Chip and I respect what they've all done previously, so I'm not surprised, but I'm very pleased. Let me make one more point here. I think one of the best things to happen to the comics medium in the United States was getting Mouse banned from school libraries, because those stories are now all over the press over the last 2 years, and people will look at that and go, wait a moment, there was a graphic novel. What's a graphic novel? About concentration camps and people who grew up through that, and now they want to take that out of schools? Those are conversations I'd like to see people have with themselves. They're promoting the medium. Getting more folks of all persuasions and stripes involved in creating comics expands the medium. And
Yeah.
we need to continuously do that, because there aren't that many people reading comics. There are so many more that would enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at the sales of young adult comics, and when you look at the
Yeah.
sales of, like, manga, the readers are there.
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Yeah, back in the days when there used to be bookstores, you would trip over all of the 11-year-old girls lying on the floor reading manga at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
And that was cool for me.
and as I said, if the stories are good, the people are going that's going to build the brand. It's going to build the thing, and as I said, I feel that it doesn't matter who is working for who. If people are making good comics, and the stories are good, and they captivate you, and they fuel your soul the way that comics have always done to me, whether it's superhero or supernatural or space science fiction or slice of life, doesn't matter. Comics are good for you. They 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 bring good things into life, because it allows the mind and the soul to expand and to go to places where it isn't today.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
Make that into a shirt. Comics are good for you. I like that.
I do. I say it all the time. It's one of the things, read more comics. They're good for you.
I love it.
We live in such a
You can make it
visual
into a shirt with one of your
society.
little skeletons. It'll be fine. Just next time you're with those people making those shirts, read more comics.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Comics are good for you.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I
Yeah.
want to thank you again.
Becky, this has been a delight.
I'm sorry.
I want to mention, before we stop talking, because we talked a lot about Somna, I really want to mention that we talked about Will Dennis a bit, who's incredible. I worked with him when he was at Vertigo. He's editing this book, so it feels really good to be working with him again. I trust him implicitly when it comes to, like, all things story. And Lee Lurich colored my sections, and Dee Cunliffe is working with Lisa on coloring her stuff. So I just wanted to kind of mention everyone who's, like, working on the book. So
yes, and yeah, I'm a big fan of Lee's. I'm a big fan of Dee's. They're both really, really great. Different stages in their careers, but like I've been watching Dee, and he's really come along so well.
And seeing what Lisa does too, like when we get the pages back, Lisa will not just talk shop again, but when I get the pages back from Lee, I uploaded everything and sent them to Lisa, and she kind of did a bunch of, like, she's art directing all the things. So it's like when we get everything together, she'll throw some, like, of her, like, watercolor or, like, fire effects on it, where it's like she's just blends the two together in a way where it's like, oh yeah, this is, I've kind of left visual transitions to her.
Well, they're fantastic.
Yeah, she's great at it. So it's just
yeah, like again, this book is just like, I don't know, it's been so much fun.
No, absolutely.
Looking forward to reading it. I'm about an hour away from that.
Ooh.
And Lucas Catoni's letters are also
my God.
important.
Yeah, I forgot about Lucas. He just killed it on this. It's like
It is
just really, we kind of like gave him a few like, oh, here's some lettering that we like, or here's like the vibe, and he just like ran with it. And it's like, oh yeah, like instinctually he knew exactly what to do, and it was like, oh, this is great. Like, you know, you just letter everything I do from now on. Yeah,
I'm a huge lettering nerd. I've said it a million times, and it. This is an example where the lettering really helps, really add something to the story. So
yeah, he's
absolutely.
Patient too. We did go back and forth on a couple things, and he was like very like patient and quickly responded, and we figured things out very quickly with like how we wanted things to work.
Great.
Yeah.
So November 22nd, you're going to be on an airplane.
I'll be on an airplane.
Everybody else will be reading it.
You can buy Somna.
and anybody in Central England, I guess, in November 11th and 12th, you're going to be at Thought Bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'll be at Thought Bubble. I'll have a table there, and I'll also be doing some signings at Traveling Man, so it'll be fun. And then I think there's going to be a distillery launch party on the Thursday night. I could be wrong. I'm doing some live drawing, which is always fun. It's like, please don't look at me while I'm drawing live. So that'll be great.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was
thank you.
Such a pleasure. And
thanks,
when
Becky.
The next book comes out, you're going to come on and we'll talk about that. How I'm thrilled by that.
Yeah, maybe we could get Lisa on too. That'll be fun.
That'd be good.
That'd be great.
I did see her in New York. She photobombed me and Will taking a picture. So
excellent. Well, we'll have to do this at like 8 a.m. though.
Well, I went to take a picture of Will and I, and she's like, "Would you like me to photobomb your picture?" I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, so pleasant.
No, if you're asking for permission, you're not photobombing.
I mean, just
you say yes.
Fun.
You say yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Becky. Take it easy. Okay, plug Thursday again.
I'm going to. I was about
Thank
to.
you.
So Thursday, everybody, we will have on popculturesquad.com an article that will link you to this YouTube channel, and it is an interview with Mike, myself, and Danny Fingeroff about his new book about Jack Ruby, and it's a wonderful discussion. We had a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy it. You can leave comments when it's there, and you guys.
We also talk about his work at Marvel and all of his comic book stuff.
And for everyone, I want to tease, there is this, like, Taylor Swift is in the discussion. Like, I don't know if that means anything, but it is in the discussion. So,
you're from Jersey. Come on,
somehow.
All right. All right. Thank you,
so
folks.
We're going to be out. We're going to be back. We're not going to be back next week because it is Halloween, and at this time, it's too many things going on. But we do have somebody scheduled for the following week, the week after that, the week after that. We have a lot coming for you, and we're going to be really excited for you to see it. All right, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, folks. See you in 2 weeks or on Thursday.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?